brief history about Dad. His father was Douglas Norton Ginn, and he was from Tasmania. He married my grandmother, Elizabeth. Sadly, Douglas died before Dad was born as a result of a road traffic accident in northern Rhodesia. Dad was himself born back in South Africa and then was taken back to northern Rhodesia to live with his mother, his grandmother, and his great-grandmother. And he always said that he was always surrounded by females. He was, however, known as Sunbeam to all these females and remained so to his mother. He was always her little Sunbeam. He went to school in northern Rhodesia, and then, as was the custom, he went to boarding school in South Africa. He had a stepfather and two half-brothers, James and Peter, and he ended up actually in the end having three stepfathers, two half-brothers and four step-brothers and two step-sisters, so quite a large family. Dad's first job was a chef, and he was in charge of the peas when the royal family visited northern Rhodesia in 1947. Following that, he trained as a carpenter, and he worked on the mines as a joiner carpenter. He enjoyed it so much that he built himself a yacht, a sailing yacht, which was called Indesha, which meant quickly. Sadly, it was far from quickly, and he often came in last in the races, but this didn't deter him from having a go. During this time, Dad also went up to help on the building of the Kariba Dam. The Italians were up there, and he learnt about concrete and working with concrete from them. Dad married in 1958 to Mum, Joan, and after that he started working more down the mines as he was in charge of the detonators down the mines. In 1968 they immigrated back to England, well, we all did, and because there were no mines here, and certainly no copper mines, Dad trained as a electronics engineer for Malvern Instruments as a buyer for many years. During this time and in Africa, we'd got sort of quite interested in caravanning, and this was continued once they were over in England. Going down to Saundersfoot, where they had a static caravan, became a big part of our lives as children. In 1981, he went back to South Africa and worked for Marconi, and Mum followed again in 1982. He then had his own business, this time in concreting, and this was in industrial waterproof concreting injection, which he had for a number of years, and in 1988 they returned to the UK, where he worked and then retired back in Leominster. And that is just a brief history of Dad and his working life. Dad loved a good trifle. He loved coconut, particularly Bounty bars, and he was very partial to chocolate-covered Brazil nuts. He was very considerate of the welfare of animals and loved having animals around, and certainly in the later years he became somewhat of a hedgehog man, adopting some hedgehogs and even setting up a night camera to watch their antics. And what do I remember most? I remember what he used to say, which was basically, don't worry, it'll all be right in the end.
Dad was always really encouraging. Whatever your talent was, he wanted to encourage what your talent was. So when I was always sewing or drawing, he would always be right behind me and saying, you know, you do whatever comes naturally, you do whatever you can. If you're going to do a job, you do it well. And that's always stayed with me. So the encouraging to sew and to be creative, which is what was in my heart, was just a relief that I could carry on and do it as a career. So that is why I am doing what I'm doing, why I've been teaching art and sewing, making things for people, and now ending up with Ginn's creative workshops and School of Sewing. And it's because of this baby. This baby arrived, I think, in about 1974. And I was struggling with an old sewing machine, and I was getting really upset about it, and everything was going wrong with all the sewing. And one day I arrived home from school, and on the table was this, with this label on, which I have kept. And it says, to my 3 girls, don't fight over it. Kung Fu Annette. I like Kung Fu there. Now I have to say that Jackie and Mum have never had a look in on this machine. They don't think they've ever been on this machine because it was my baby. And this is the machine I have used ever since, my Frister and Rossmann. And Dad would search on which magazine to get the right one, to get the best one. Has to be the best. And it's lasted, and I've looked after it, because he would always say, you look after your tools. A good workman doesn't blame his tools if it goes wrong. And it was just the best ever present ever in my whole life. So thanks, Dad, and it's still going strong, and I look after it, clean it, so you would be proud. Well, the one thing I've just realised is how organised Dad was and how he labelled everything. And I thought, yeah, I love labels. I have to label everything. I have to have a place for everything. And so that's obviously come through the genes. And I can see it happening with Millie. And she's labelling everything and she's organised. And it's wonderful, and I'm so pleased for it, because it made running a textile workshop run smoothly because everything had its place. So thank you, Dad.
Right from an early age, Dad was very keen on fitness and exercise. And right from that, he developed keen interest in bodybuilding. He went into a competition and got the title of Mr. Northern Rhodesia. And this led on to him being selected for what was then the Empire Games in 1954. Unfortunately, as a young child, Dad, being as he was, climbed a tree and sadly fell out and seriously damaged his arm. And the legacy of this was that he could no longer lift the weights that was necessary for the bodybuilding, and he had to decline. However, this love of fitness carried on all through his life, and he encouraged everybody to take up sports and to do whatever was their interest. The legacy of also falling out of the tree was meant that his back was never terribly good, and he struggled all his life with back pain, never letting on to anybody, even right up until the last days in the hospital, when he never ever complained about anything.
So Dad was brought up in a very strong Christian household, and this is what he held close to his heart, the values that he had been taught. Dad loved creation, and he loved to create, and Dad loved people. He respected everybody, regardless of race, creed, colour, and they respected him.
Well, I remember the time when I was with you and your mum and dad out in South Africa, and one memory that stands out to me is when your dad, when Norton, took me to the township, and I'll never forget it, when he said, you could bring your camera and we're going to photograph in the township. I said, oh, I don't think I'd be able to do that. And my hands were shaking with the camera at the time because I was so nervous about it. But just me and your dad, we would just wander into the township, photographing all these people carrying blocks of ice on their head to store to keep things cool in the summer. And it's such a memorable moment of me being able to photograph with your dad by my side, just protecting me, really. And it was the most wonderful experience.
Brilliant.
And before we went to the Kruger National Park, your dad's photography, when he showed me his lovely old camera, twins lens reflex, I think it was a Yashica, if I remember rightly, and he showed me these photographs and told me how he developed them in his lovely darkroom, and just seeing this one of a lion in black and white, I mean, it's just a lovely shot. I can imagine your dad taking that. And then I went out and I could do it myself then, on my own.
Brilliant.
It's just
Wonderful.
wonderful memories of Norton, being there.
In 3 weeks, Ginn and I will have been married for 30 years. When I first met her, she was already an amazing woman. And 30 years later, she's grown into an awesome woman. Strong, wise, humble, with an incredible love and respect for everyone she meets. But women like Ginn and Jackie don't just appear by chance. They're created by all sorts of influences. One of the greatest is by parental influence and example, and Norton, being a perfectionist, created 2 incredible daughters, one of whom I've been blessed to have shared my life with. Norton's influence in Ginn is undeniable. Her calmness is his calmness. Her wisdom is his wisdom. Her humour is his humour, and her faith is his faith. But it doesn't end there. Norton and Joan's legacy continues with our children. His influence continues unabated to this very day. So thank you, Norton. You will always be right here amongst us.
When I first met Jackie, Norton had already moved back to South Africa, and it wasn't until we got married and Richard was 1 year old that we actually went to South Africa on holiday and met him. So that was the first time I met my father-in-law. But it turned out that he was never really just my father-in-law. He was a great friend of mine, a mate, if you like. And this came later on in life when they moved back to England in the late 80s. They actually came and lived with us for a while. And through Norton's love of winemaking, I got to sample some of his fine wine, and I do remember drinking the wine at while we watched the 1990 World Cup, which was a great time. And then later on in his life, for his 70th birthday, we as a family bought him a computer, which then started another history in his life altogether, and where he started off doing his genealogy and did various family tree history for a number of different families, made a number of contacts with people mostly in New Zealand and Australia, and with his use of the computer and his Skype use, he used to speak to a lot of those people quite a bit. And since then we've had a number of lovely messages from the people that he made contact with through the family tree, with messages of how well and how loved he was by them, which have been much appreciated messages. I'll long remember the times that I've spent on his computer with him, trying to sort out the problems on the computer. And as I said before, it's as a friend I remember him, not as a father-in-law.
Thoughts about our dearest Norton come so easily, thoughts, but words are more difficult. He was such a lovable, composed, peaceful man. I always enjoyed his warm, comfy hug when we came together, and his quiet conversations. It was such a privilege to have shared the last short time with him the day before he left us, and to have listened to his deep, well thought out conversation. It was truly wonderful. I can't quite believe that we won't see him about this place again, and we will miss him so much. But I know that there must be such a welcome and a rejoicing in heaven right now. We are blessed indeed to have known and to have taken a small place in Norton's special life, and I thank God for him.
Hey Norton, we've all got many memories and many things to thank you for. I think personally I need to thank you for most of the tools that I seem to have acquired through my dad and from you over the years. Things like the compressor and stuff from your mining years, and also mainly for teaching me how to ride my bike without stabilisers. We found an old photo in the back garden in South Africa of you making me jump over a ramp on my bike. I think Mum's in one of them, not looking very happy about that. And also very pleased that you got to meet your great-granddaughter.
Hey Gramps, can't believe it was last week. We were just sitting and joking together, and I just want to say that I love you very much, and you're a very, very kind man who gave some really lovely cuddles, and I promise I will follow your instructions about being very safe with online dating, and I will miss being constantly asked if I bought a new handbag, which I have. It's here. So I just want to say, love you lots, rest in peace. Mwah.
Gramps was an amazing, generous man. He was very caring, and I remember how he always used to Skype me, especially when I was in America. As soon as I would log on, he would call me to see if I was okay. He would always make up little jolly songs, and he called himself a little sunbeam. When I was younger, there were certain words I loved to hear him say because of his accent, like mulk and sup. I also loved his shuffly dancing he always used to do. He was so positive and humble, thinking of others first. The last message he ever sent to me was, "Bye bye, my pretty maid."
A list of Grumpy. Gorgeous Grumps, so handsome, smooth his skin glowing, a smile that lit you up, a heart full of kindness, selfless gifts to help me heal, silly songs and words to make me giggle, a washing up champion, his little room so messy but always keeping busy, things to fix and the family tree, Skype always online checking we are happy and fine, kissable forehead, kissable cheeks, so easy to talk to and hang out with, love, 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 and thank you, my Grumps, caring, loving gentleman, you are just the friggin' cutest.
It's been amazing to hear how much of an influence that Grandpa's values and his attitudes and his actions have had on everyone in the family and beyond that. And I think we can forget that what we do now will impact the generations ahead. For starters, I wouldn't have made this film with that Grandpa. I wouldn't have made any films, in fact, because it was Grandpa that first put a big old chunky 90s camcorder in my hands and let me use his editing equipment in the back of the VHS player. And for that I'm really thankful, because if it wasn't for him then I wouldn't be doing this right now. And making films has now been a massive part of my life and of my childhood and of my work and of my faith. Grandpa would capture every family event, no matter where it was or what it was. And not just because he could, but it came out of the value he had for people and for family and memories. God calls us to be faithful, but he also calls us to be fruitful, to share the good that we have in others and multiply it wherever we can. And that's what Grandpa did. And probably without realising, just because that's the way he was. He shared a passion that was in him, in me. And being the genius that Grandpa was, he even adapted a certain walking stick so he could prop himself up and actually film at the same time by mounting the camera on the top. It just shows that he could actually, he made it happen. No matter what, he was gonna capture those memories. And another thing I wanted to say is, in a few days, it's gonna be Naomi and my anniversary, our first year anniversary. And being brought up surrounded by amazingly strong marriages and relationships has obviously no doubt had an impact on me as a husband, because we are who we are because of who Grandpa was as a husband and as a dad. I could always see and hear that sense of protection that Grandpa wanted for Nanny and the love for her and for us. Grandpa was selfless and strong, yet gentle, and grateful no matter what. Whenever it came to his birthday, it's always hard buying for your granddad. And the last resort would mostly always be bounty bars. But every time he received those bounty bars, it would be like the first time he received them, with such a sense of gratitude. And Nanny, you got yourself a catch there because he was good looking. And I just hope that I've got a little bit of those genes here. So thank you, Grumps. This film is for you, and I literally couldn't have done it without you. So I hope it's up to your standards of perfection.
So Dad had a perfectionist streak, and some of that has been passed down to the generations. And he was always just did everything to a very high standard, and his carpentry was beautiful. So one day, just before Richard's 21st, I asked him to renovate a really battered old mandolin I'd bought. And I just said, just give it a quick polish. That's all I need. Just a quick polish, and then I can give it to Rich for his birthday. Well, when we opened up the case, Dad had miraculously renovated this beautiful mandolin, and he'd put in the French polish, he'd put in the inlay, and I was completely blown away by it. So this is really a symbol of Dad's gifts to us, Dad's talent, and his view on life. Dad has had to leave us very quickly, but we know why. There's a big problem in heaven, and he's been called with his toolkit in hand to get up there. I expect he's putting fiberglass on those pearly gates, and the angels are jumping for joy.